Hello, Vibers. Thank you so much for tuning in and welcome to Northern Vibe. Richard Guay was a Huey gunship pilot in Vietnam on his first tour. He flew Chinooks on search and destroy missions on his second tour. He flew in the Bougainville War and in the mountains of Papua New Guinea, dodging armed rascals delivering pay for coffee plantations. He's also an author. This was a seriously interesting conversation with a brilliant, accomplished, and I know he won't mind me saying this, eccentric man. He really has been there and done that. Now, besides discussing how he experienced war, and it's not what you think, he discusses a recent ADHD diagnosis. Like me, he has concerns regarding the category of ADHD as a condition rather than just a normal, and I'm going to say this, important aspect of human variability. We discussed this medicalisation of the human condition and issues with funding from Big Pharma and what it means for us really as humanity in the future. He's a real character. I know you'll love this chat as much as I did. It's pretty much unedited and well worth watching right until the end, running just under an hour. I've called this one Valkyrie Rider. But I know you don't want to hear from me. You want to hear from my awesome guest. So let's put him on right now. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe. Chief Warrant Officer Richard Guay, thank you so much for coming on Northern Vibe.
Well, thank you very much for having me indeed, Matt. I appreciate it.
And mate, love the air cavalry hat that you're wearing right there. And that's from the war, isn't it?
That's the real deal, yeah.
It's an ADHD diagnosis. That is so cool, bro. Like me, having become familiar with your book and speaking to you, I get the feeling you'd almost rather fly than fornicate. There's a real touch of Jonathan Livingston Seagull about you and your work. You can fly anything, from a Bell to a Chinook. And mate, I was brought up with you wearing right there, and that's obviously Biggles, the World War I ace. I mean, it must have been exciting what you did, and you having to perform a highly technical task with stuff blowing up and being shot at must have just been intense. Can you tell us about how that felt?
That's a very good question. Okay, if we keep things in context, the way I felt at the time, look, I say it in the book many times. I was diagnosed with ADHD, but at the age of 68, a little bit late. But can I say this? I loved every bit of it. I was just so full of, I was 10 foot tall. I was bulletproof. My hair was on fire. And when things happened, they happened like with me, like times 3, times 4.
Yeah.
Instead of the guy sitting next to me who's going, oh shit, what's going on here? I'm going, look at that. Did you see that? Oh, I'm getting paid to do this. Jesus Christ. But I just loved it. So I was like, I couldn't get enough. And I know that, and I do not wish to, the thing is, that's me. I do not wish to say that in combat, especially in combat, it sounds contradictory. I didn't enjoy anything per se, but I was always living in the very microsecond at that moment, at that time, responding to whatever my laser-like focus allowed me to think of. And it's in my book. I wrote, because I use this short story fashion, there's a story on landing and burning rice paddies, and that's probably about the most accurate description you could get from somebody like myself for exactly how the brain works. And it triages, it places things in order, it lists the actions required at that very second, and it's all included in that one story, landing and burning rice paddies. So things went very much for me. Instead of saying, Christ, let's get home, I don't want to do this again, I'd just say, where's the next one? Where's the next one? Where's the next one?
Yeah.
And I actually, without knowing I was ADHD, I was using it as a tool. And I'd like to encourage anyone that has that diagnosis and tell them it is not the end of the world. As a matter of fact, if you learn about it, you learn to control it, you learn to work with it, it can be a most valuable tool. So, but feeling combat was like, I don't know, like being in a rugby league game and breaking free of a guy that's 1 meter behind you all the way to the goal line. You're just doing everything you can, as fast as you can, as accurately as you can, and enjoying the moment. If that describes it, I don't know, you know.
It kind of does. And actually, I want to dive into that. That's a brilliant answer, actually. And there's so much I want to dive into. Really quickly, I want to digress and just talk about the ADHD thing. And I
Ah,
want to run something past you. I'm not seeking validation. I just want to know your honest opinion. I
good.
think it's kind of codswallop. And I don't mean that people don't behave in a certain way, because, you'd probably guess that I'm like, if there's a spectrum, I'm most certainly on it. But I think the codswallop comes from the categorization and the medicalization of normal parts of the human condition that in the right place and the right time are totally necessary and positive. Like, you were kind of born to fly helicopters in combat. Like, you need people like you. And then you can use those skills in other places like Papua New Guinea, to pick an example entirely at random, which is something else we're going to discuss.
Good.
Um, I get concerned about this label that's supposed to be negative because it's been medicalized. Obviously, anything you treat is by definition negative.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And yes, that's true. I actually had a phone call out of the blue from an AMBO here in Cairns, and who had just read the book. He said, "I've just put your book down. I love it." He said, "It's fantastic. But the one thing I've never seen in print before is someone talking about ADHD as basically a benefit." He said, I have friends that have received that diagnosis and they just burrow down into a dark hole and think, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Blah, 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 blah." He said, "But you have, for the first time in print," he said, "I've ever seen, you have actually brought it out that it." I said, "Yeah, it's a tool." He said, "That's right. It is a tool." I said, "Yes, but all you've got to do is learn what you can about it and then channel your energy and control yourself," if you'd like to put it that way,
Mm.
but channel that energy into something constructive and use it for goal setting and use it for achieving a goal. And we talked for over an hour. I was just blown away. And a friend, I just finished recording my audio book, and the engineer said, "I'm going to send you a book up to a friend of mine who writes for a national news banner and does book reports." And I said, "Well, tell them to look at it from the ADHD point, because people need to hear this. It is
Mm.
not the end of the world at all, not at all." So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with you 110%.
And look, now that we know, because look, this is a very big digression, incidentally, but post COVID, I come from a family that's got a lot of medical people in it, with doctors and nurses and whatnot in the family.
Yep.
But and I have an inherently high respect and affection for the medical profession. I need to
Mm,
make that qualification
mm,
so people can understand the context of what I'm about to say. Like, post COVID, we're starting to understand just how much of an influence the pharmaceutical industry, and that's what it is. So, and I don't mean that in a sinister sense. I mean, it's a good thing that we have a pharmaceutical industry in some ways, because it means we're getting all these drugs we can kind of treat people.
yeah.
But the downside of that is that, like, there is a deep desire to categorize and medicalize everything.
Yes.
And I think that that's really, really, really sinister, frankly. And
Well,
it concerns
yeah,
the absolute hell out of me, that because if I had have been, like, if I was born today, 100% sure I would have been like, without the right parents, I'd have been pilled up. You know what I mean? Or if I had a single mother who was just like working hard, got all these other things they got to do, and dealing with some pain in the ass hypo ADHD Matt Maloney, like, take this, shut up, sit in the corner. You know what I mean? And it's no one's fault. It's just that,
yeah. My mother was my savior too. Well, I mean, when it comes to just letting me go, and right through my teen years, when I used to get a whole four-piece band in my bedroom and bang away with drums and electric guitars and amps and everything, she never said a word. She just
yeah,
let
it's
me
like,
go.
that's just him.
It
You
was
know
my
what I mean?
savior.
And thank God for that. But like, with this desire to categorize, account for, medicalize, and treat
Yes,
everything, it's like,
you're right. Yeah,
anyway. Let's
agreed.
not digress too much along down that path, because it kind of like is really, it's a little too interesting, actually. But look, I can tell part of you misses it, and not the death and destruction, obviously, but the challenge and intensity. But that leads me on to a kind of question. The thing about taking responsibility and putting oneself in positions of real challenge and danger is that people die. And my understanding is a gunship can put out something like 5,000 rounds a minute, which is about 83 rounds a second, I think. What's it,
4,000, but yeah.
what's it like
In
knowing that
our
there are people alive today because of the actions you've taken? And conversely, what's it like knowing that the people are dead directly because of your action? And I ask not in a judgmental way, because I'm a former police officer. Like, what is it, what does it feel like? What's it feel like to you to know that? Like, that's a burden in some ways, you know what I mean?
And in my book, I will have mentioned at some stage that having the so-called affliction of ADHD allowed me one very particular trait, and that was I never dwelt on anything very long. Yes, you're correct. I flew gunships. Yes, we put out 4,000 7.62 millimeter bullets a minute. Divide that by 60 per second. That's a lot of bullets. And at 2,000, I remember it's 100 bullets a second. And when you turn those on, things just physically, literally disappeared. But the point is, in dealing with death and in dealing with what I was doing out, I came up with a term in my head called aerial ordnance delivery. And looking back over time, the one thing that continually pops up when it comes into my mind is that my friends, my other Vietnam veteran friends who are not in a good space, were mostly infantrymen or infanteers who engaged at a distance of between 5 and 1 meter in the jungle and just stitched people. And they saw the result of their efforts. I didn't see that. We would get a body count at the end of the day because Westmoreland came up with how can you win a war without seeing anybody? Yeah. And at the end of the day, we got 15 kills or 20 kills, or one day 96 kills. I got a medal for that one. But the point is, it wasn't there. I didn't see it. I might see a secondary explosion come up when a rocket went into a bunker, and boom, boom. The second boom was the ordnance going off in there. You know everyone's dead. What's next? Where's the next one? Because the shit flies everywhere sometimes, and you don't have time to dwell. So you can imagine if you had been in a police scenario when there's a bullet coming past you every 10 seconds in the wrong direction, you don't stop and think. You don't think about what you're doing. You're defending yourself.
Yep.
You got a guy with a very high-powered rifle. He's pointing it right at you. And I saw a lot of that in PNG and 4 years in the war there. And I mean, you're looking down his barrel. And it just depends on who falls first. And that's the way I saw it. I was defending myself, my crew, my people, my infantrymen on the ground. And I did not dwell. I even use a quote in the book in conjunction with ADHD, and that is, I never joined the what if club.
Yeah.
And that's really, really important.
Yeah, 100%.
It is.
The other thing I think it's linked to is because I was a peer support officer in the police, and people would come sliding up to me if there was something that they were concerned about that was bothering their consciences. And I am convinced from speaking to quite a few coppers that have kind of like imploded, frankly, some of them in front of me while I'm talking to them,
yep,
that if someone, because everybody has a self-image, I just want to articulate this correctly. Everybody has a self-image. And of course, like if you're in the police or in the military or something like that, firstly, you're a person who likes to serve, you have a self-image as a good guy, knight in shining armor kind of stuff.
Yep. But
if you end up doing something that crushes that self-image in the heat of the moment or whatever it is,
yep, and
that you can't validate, I won't use the word rationalize, you can't validate by putting it towards a higher goal, or the higher goal is in itself a flawed higher goal, that's where the collapse comes. I think it's like, oh my God, I'm not the person I thought I was. I've done something that went against my conscience that seems terrible, and it wasn't in the service of a greater good. Does that make sense with you?
Yeah. Don't overthink it. That's my advice. Don't overthink it. Okay, this is interesting because you're making me think. At least once or twice a month, we'd be sitting in the barracks well, I was at Benoit, and our barracks were all not necessarily close together, but we had enlisted, say, 300 meters away. We had officers over here, we had pilots over there, we had real officers over there. But you'd be sitting talking to somebody, and all of a sudden at about 8 or 9 o'clock at night, you hear, brrr, and you just look at each other, there goes another one. Overthinking.
Yeah.
Muzzle in the mouth, lean on the trigger, full magazine, 20 rounds, no more problems. Overthinking. Doing something you're not meant to be doing. Overthinking. Just do your job, get on with the job. You don't have to necessarily enjoy it, but that's what all your training is for. If you can't do that, then get the hell out of Dodge and get another job. Yep. Because no one wants to see suicides.
No.
And so many of my friends in Vietnam have committed suicide. And of course, you find out a year later, or, oh my God, is that right? Oh, Jesus Christ, he was a great guy. But those are your demons running around in your head. Yeah. While you're overthinking. And that's why I praise ADHD, because even though I did what I did, and to this day, it's all there. It's all in a tiny little box with a ribbon on top. Yeah. And I write about it in the book.
Yeah.
It stays until I wrote the book. And then I had to undo those little ribbons. Oh my God. That's how I went, okay, that's enough. Close it up again. To get the emotion. I use something in my book, just to digress a little bit, but what I did was remember something. And there's a chapter in there I said, do not read this chapter. There's a lot of people that have commented on that. But it was, I'm not going to give it away. A lot of people haven't read it. And I say, well, that's bloody good on you, because you're not going through what I did. But while I was writing, right through the book, if I started crying and in remembering these things, I would stop and I would get hold of myself and I step out of the book. I say, dear reader. And I'm in the middle of a story and I say, dear reader. And I talk to you for 3 or 4 sentences telling you what I'm feeling inside and how it's affecting me at the moment. And then I jump back into the story again. People love it. That's how I seem to have struck a chord with the public, with having that bestseller for 6 months. People love it. And I've had almost 600 reviews in 6 months. That's crazy. Nobody does that so quickly without being affected. And my rating is 4.3 stars out of 600 almost. So it works because I take the time to speak to you, not just words on a page, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Look, what that says to me is it's the way, because we live in a kind of like materialistic society, and I don't just mean that in the sense of like buying stuff, that dismissive sense. I mean in the philosophical sense, as in materialism. There is no greater God. There's no God. There's no anything else like that. And what that means is the way, because the way we actually live is in a story. And I think that you've articulated that well. Like you've written that, you've lived a story, you've written it. And when you go back to rewrite it, you're reliving it, but you're also retelling the narrative and kind of like shuffling things around. If people just live in a set of facts that have no meaning or point, well, they're the ones that are going to really suffer because they don't understand it. It's like, no, you live in a story. It's not that there aren't events. It's not that the world isn't real. Like I'm not appealing to some sort of Gnostic idea that there's no reality and this is all fake. No. Directly the opposite is true. But we experience life as a story. And a story has events, but also a meaning and a point and an aim. Like every good story has a character arc. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. Absolutely. I agree. But you see what you're able to do, like I do, is you step out of that. You step off the stage and you look back in again, or I say lifting the curtain, you're having a look at yourself. And a lot of people don't seem to be able to grasp that objectively. It's always emotionally. And that's normal. There's nothing wrong with that. But at least you can have a look a look at what's going on in your head or in your life, or why am I even thinking like this? Or what am I thinking about? What is my trigger? What can I stay away from? What can I lift up? And you and I can do this objectively. I think anyone that's ever been literally very close to death can be on that stage and just go back in the audience and watch yourself for a little while, because you've learned life doesn't go on forever. It can actually be very quickly changed. And I embrace that, actually.
Yeah.
I embrace it. And I think about it often. I try and think about, what is this person thinking of me, but not in any other way than a casual observation.
Yep.
Because I try to conduct, as you say, I try and conduct myself in a fashion that I will always be proud of, or, and deliver what society expects of me. There's lots of people out there who don't give a crap about what society thinks of them. But this is how people that I think have been in the public service or in a martial way, like you and I have, then we appreciate the day, we appreciate waking up, we appreciate a whole new reset on life.
Yep.
That lets us enjoy it.
Yep.
Doesn't stop us from enjoying it. It lets us enjoy it. We're here.
Yeah, 100%. And see, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, we hear a lot about post-traumatic stress disorder, but I'm a big believer in post-traumatic stress growth. Like, I'm a better person for having faced death and found out the really shit parts about my character too, incidentally. It's like, oh, turns out you really like violence. Oh, okay. I didn't kind of, well, and that's a confronting thing to find out.
Yeah.
And turns out that you do have the capacity to abuse power. Oh, you're not Luke Skywalker. Not that, but so yeah. I mean, I thank God for that experience. But look, going back to the book and to Vietnam, if I can ask you in retrospect, was it a war that needed to be fought? What?
Do you know how many people have asked themselves that question, or asked the guy sitting next to him, was it a war that needed to be fought? Look, I'm glad you asked that question, because I do have a theory. Let's just go back to the day I arrived. I got off the jet, it's in the book, looked around, felt the heat, smelled the smells, saw the people sort of all look the same, dare I say that. But to us, you're off a plane, you've just hours before been in the United States. Now you're in a nation on the other side of the world. You're there to follow through with your training, which was stop the spread of communism. Stop the spread of communism. It's the domino theory. If Vietnam falls, then Thailand falls, and Laos falls, blah, 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 blah. We're looking at like the Crimea, Poland, same scenario, the same height. When I got there, I felt like a crusader. And I was going to help these poor people out. We're a wealthy country. We can do this. We can help these people live a free and democratic life. It was a good question. Was it necessary? Well, obviously, to me, the answer is no. If you look at the end result, and it only cost America 55,800 lives. Not a lot of people remember that. We killed 55,800 men and women in that country for them, not for us, theoretically, what was for us, but for them. It got us nowhere except digging a lot of graves, and God love them. All my, we won't go there, but the people that perished, that gave the supreme sacrifice in combat, were there for a purpose. And we all agreed, I think, on that, or most of us did. But 3 months into that tour, my first tour, you knew the story, and that is, I don't know that we were all that welcome, actually. We did terrible things that, and when I say that, I mean, we were loud, we were brash, we were a bit holier than thou. We didn't necessarily make friends. They used to say the whole war was winning hearts and minds, and it was. We didn't do a very good job of that on the whole. But that's because I know too much. But anyway, the point is, look, was it necessary? It was a political war. It was not necessarily what we're looking at now, where the invasion's already happened when Russia invaded the Ukraine. It was like trying to stop that.
Mhm.
And the Viet Cong, who were the Vietnamese communists, had an ideal. They had a principle that they fought for. We had one that we fought for. We were enemies. We
Mhm.
killed each other as fast and as often as we could. But was it a necessary war, being your original question? In my opinion, and not to dishonor those that have
No.
made the sacrifice, I don't think it should have happened.
Wow. I mean, that's a very brave thing to say, because implicit in that point is, again, not to demean the sacrifice and intentions of anyone, but it calls into question is like, and again, I know this from my policing experience. If you go in and kind of like, sometimes you have to headlock someone or whatever it is, or, it's a really violent situation. You have to sort things out, but you walk out thinking, well, was I the good guy there? Like, and for clarity for this specific thing, to bring it back to you and your book, because that's what it's about. Look, I loathe communism, loathe it.
Yes.
But it does bring into the question, like with any human action, that war, a police action, whatever it is, like where is the point of diminishing returns? And how do you ascertain if you're doing more harm, not just to the country and its people for this one, but our best and our brightest?
Well
Like,
put. Yeah, well put. Because that's what it is. The law of diminishing return. Where do you go with it? And again, there's an area there you could overthink that whole war if you wanted to.
yeah,
You could overthink the death of your friends. You could overthink everything. For Christ's sake, live in the moment, get on with the life. You've got a family, you've got whatever your circumstances are,
yeah,
and be productive and keep moving, because any of that could swallow you. And I just didn't allow it, and I don't allow it. And it's something that we have to do because we are who we are, I think.
yep,
I
yep.
can't answer it that's kind of
No,
banal, but
that makes total sense. And none of us have got time machines, so you can't.
no.
You can't go back. Mind you, I do have a PhD in hindsight, Richard. I can't.
We all do.
I'm waiting for my doctorate to come through.
Good on you. It's in the mail.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Matt Maloney, PhD in hindsight. But like, let's go into some of the. I don't want to use cool after we've had this kind of dark and deep situation discussion. But like, you did 2 tours. I want to go on to the kind of like more exciting and intense side of things. Can you tell us a couple of cool wars? First, can you tell us about how many sorties you did and what were the main aims of most of your missions? Like, what was the kind of like what were you doing most of the time? And then
Sure.
can you tell us a couple of cool war stories?
Oh, okay. Um, the sorties and so forth, I would have no idea the number, because it was virtually a daily basis. But when I came to the unit I was assigned to, which I think really, and we all probably feel the same way as pilots, it was one of the best in the country. We had to do 90 days minimum flying what we call slicks, or the troop transport ones you see in the movies where all the guys are diving out the doors. That's
Yep.
a slick. It's called a slick because it only has two M60s, one on either side, as a defensive. I love that, a defensive weapon,
Okay.
800 rounds a minute. So, but those 90 days, and it's in the book, but those 90 days were pure gold when you learn how to really fly a helicopter. We got to Vietnam with 210 hours of flight time. The average commercial pilot here in Australia, I did run a flight school for a while, gets his commercial with 130. We got 210. And a lot of that was toward the end of our 9-month training period. In the last 3 weeks were in Hueys, but very intense, learning formation flight, what the machine feels like, because we were all piston powered till we got to these beautiful machines with these massive turbine engines. But then once we got there, that's when school started. That's really when school started. When you learn to pick up a helicopter just off the ground and only be able to hover at 2 inches with the skid height without sort of bumping back down to the ground again and say, what happened? Because you're always carrying the maximum amount of load you could carry. And that was all usually in numbers of infantry. So once you learned, you started learning how to, you didn't fly the machine, you wore it, literally wore it. And my whole career of 37 years flying choppers, I wore that machine. because it talked to you all the time. And you learn that. And it's in the book. There's a chapter called Extracting Troops Through a Hover Hole. Um, a naval commander that's on the back cover of my book, who said I couldn't put it down. I read it in one sitting. He still shakes his head. He said, that was the most gripping thing I've ever read. And he had 30 years in the service as an underwater demolition, starting out, in the British Navy. But the point is, your training gears you to think like the guy sitting beside you who's been there for 9 months, or his second tour, or his third tour, and our tours were a year, watching you all the time, watching you. It's like being in a chicken yard. You got a one-eyed rooster and you're the cricket. He's got you in the corner, because they had to evaluate us all that time. And they were aircraft commander meetings, and you didn't even know that, because the aircraft commanders, what they did was discuss who they were flying with. And we flew with somebody different almost every day. It was a wealth of experience and knowledge sitting in the other seat every day about different things. But if you ever got spoken to, you better hope it was with a smile and that you'd done all right. Because if you stuffed up, they would let you stuff up. And if they had to touch the controls, oh my God. But they watched what you did. Okay, 90 days of that. And then from day one, I was kicking the door on the gun platoon commanding officer's boots, and where he was living. I want in. It was go away, go away, go away. At day 91, I was in the gunship platoon. I think it goes back to my Native American heritage as warriors. But anyway, you had a gene in there somewhere. But the point is, it was open school every day, even in gunships, especially in gunships when you couldn't go over a 2-inch hover. Some days we were so heavily loaded with 6,000 rounds of machine gun for the miniguns, 2,000 rounds each for the door gunners and their M60 machine guns, full load of fuel, and the poor engine just didn't deliver enough power to get it off the ground. And I wrote about that because we could hopscotch it out, but that's another story. But because we parked in L-shaped revetments, we had to back out. And if you couldn't get the thing off the ground, and I used to laugh on my day off, I'd be down the flight line and watching these rotor blades cone like that. They'd cone up. Nothing moved. And I'd laugh. I said, it's your day. But anyway, wind it up, beep it up, overspeed, yank it up, and you move a meter. Boom, boom, back on the back skid, back on the front skid. Do it again until you can get out and take off. And the takeoffs were amazing to watch, because the tungsten skid shoes, when they were sliding on the bitumen, created the burnouts like you've never seen. The helicopter almost disappeared in smoke before you could break ground and get that 18 knots of speed up to go through translational lift and actually waffle off the ground. And just waffle, and pray to God you were going to climb enough to get off the building, and the 2-story building in your flight path, get out of Benoit. There's a guy that comes to mind who was on his third tour. I'll use a false name of Henry. And Henry was cool. He was a cool gunship driver. He was 3 years in gunships, and he was only a lot crazy, not just a little. There was one song that we all day long. This is the war, American style. We had an ADF, automatic direction finder, and you could tune that to the local radio station. And we tuned our ADF navigation radio to Armed Forces Vietnam, AFVN radio station. Adrian Coronaro was there. And no, it wasn't. It was after him, but everybody did Good Morning Vietnam at 7 o'clock in the morning on guard frequency. But anyway, when Let the Sun Shine In, Age of Aquarius would come on.
Oh, yeah.
No matter what we were doing, and he sat in the right seat in the minigun ship, where I was in the left seat on the miniguns, he was on the rockets. He would take off his seatbelt, grab the door frame with his left hand, step out of the machine, and actually stick his feet and one arm out in a gun run, as we just would pick up a 40-degree dive angle for me to fire the rockets, and the door gunner behind him trying to shoot around him with his legs out, and the rockets going between his legs. Get in, Reggie. I got a break. I got a break. Throw his ass in the chair. Boom. And off we'd go with another guy rolling in behind us, putting his stuff down. That was terrifying and bloody funny at the same time. And he's still alive, thank God. So he was great. But, you know, that sort of thing happened. That was on the funny side. But I remember the first time I saw somebody we killed. We, I don't know how. Are you sure you want to talk about this kind of stuff? I mean, yeah. Well, I remember the day. You know how they say, people ask me, how do you remember this? How do you remember this? But they tell us, and you know, the minute something makes an impression on your brain to a certain magnitude on the Richter scale, it's locked in. That occurrence is there. I mean, close your eyes, you know, it's there. So we had gone in after we inserted the infantry, and what we would do then is just like sharks. We just circle around the infantry. We were long, wide ovals or tight, short, depending. And if the infantry had no contact, we were there anyway, because there would be. And one day somebody fired at us from nipa palm. Now, nipa palm grows like the top of a palm tree without a stem, without a trunk, straight up out of the water. Right. And it's very thick, can be very thick. And you can hide in there quite easily. We just happened to fly over a certain spot, and you can always hear, people don't know it, you can hear where the fire comes from. You can almost name the weapon it comes from, but just flew just a quick burst. Oh, he paid for that one. So what we did was take a fire, because we were always the low ship. We were like 10 feet above the Nipa or 2 feet above the ground, but the minis kind of level the playing field, miniguns, and broke off. And the guy behind us says, okay, he came over. Okay, we got you. So we both went and orbited while we always carried a case of fragmentation grenades. So the grenades get all handed out, 6 in my lap, 6 in the door gunner, 6 in the crew chief. We say, okay, we're going to pick up the snip up right here, and we just pull the pins and throw them out the door. We flew in no doors for easy exit if we crash. So just plop, 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 plop. Here comes this guy hauling ass out of the Nipa into the river. That's why you do it. And, you know, or you could back off and just, instead of doing that, you could rocket, you know, with each of our rockets had a 17-pound warhead that was the exact equivalent of a 105 howitzer round. So we flew around with batteries of artillery in our tubes. So you put 5 or 10 rockets in a certain spot, and that's what happened on this day. And then you go back and come down to treetop height or nipa palm height in the river, and there's a body. So that's how gunships work in a wet area scenario. Mm-hmm. But far too many stories to tell about it. But it was all actually training, yep, and then execution. Yep. And stick to the rule book. Never overfly your target. Never. And a lot of guys got shot down overflying the target. We would break 200 to 300 meters and turn away with the door gunners hanging under the machine, literally 1 foot on the skid and firing underneath the machine to keep the heads down where we knew the target was, long enough to hopefully cover our break, because by the time we were on the way back up again to start running in again for a rocket run or a mini run, the other machine was already putting his rockets down, keeping their heads down. That was the whole idea. The whole war was fought like that. We flew the whole war at 80 knots. Yeah. And you know what? We were so fortunate in my platoon anyway, in my company, that hardly any of us ever took more than a few hits unless we were inserting or extracting in slips. Then we just got full of holes. But yeah, so that's the way the war went.
Yeah, by the book.
By the book, yes. By the book. That's exactly right. Well done. Yeah.
By the book. Actually, I will put it up on screen while we speak. But if you wouldn't mind, if you hang on, just one.
Oh, look at you.
Yeah, hang on. I'm just going to try and get this up. That doesn't seem to be working. Anyway,
I
just,
was going to put my banner behind me, but I
oh no,
remember it was on
that's okay.
Zoom.
But look, drawing on your experience, and I know you do talk about this in the book, does killing come naturally to people, or does it kind of need to be taught? Like, what's
Uh,
the?
that's a very good question. Let me think a second. Does killing come naturally? Oh, what do you know? There's the cover. Thank you. Wow, that looks great. Well done. Uh, yeah, that was a copy before prep publication. I sent you digitally. But the does it come naturally? I think it's contrary to human. If I asked you that, I think it's contrary to human nature to want to take the life of another person.
Hmm.
But don't forget, we we, and it's in the book, we were taught to kill. We were trained to kill.
Bayonet training.
We overcame. We overcame that urge not to kill, and it starts with the spirit of the bayonet, which is another chapter in my a short story about how the United States Army turned your brother or the guy across the street into a killer, and it was done with the bayonet training. In my opinion, that's only a personal opinion, but it's well documented in my book what my thoughts are.
Fantastic. Look, if you wouldn't mind digressing a little bit and talking about your experiences in Papua New Guinea, because obviously with the book you're well known for that, but you flew up there. And I've got to say, our lives are very, in some ways, very serendipitous. I was a rescue crewman in the Torres Straits, a tea bag they used to call us, coming out of.
Well, look, I flew the medevac in Torres Strait for 2 years with Reef helicopters back around 2001 and 2.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I was there in 97, 98, 99.
Well, just when
Just
you left, I got there.
just tapped out in 2000.
There you go.
Oh my God. Yeah. So
But about New Guinea, yeah.
yeah. And well, the other thing is I lived in New Guinea when I was a kid. So
Oh, did you?
yeah. I schooled in Papua New Guinea. But anyway, so like tell us about flying in Papua New Guinea. What the heck were you doing up in that wonderful but strange and
Oh,
dangerous country?
I flew for 20 years up there. Yes, very dangerous, bloody country. I can tell you the weather was totally unforgivable, unforgiving. I came up here, opened up a business as an auctioneer in 88, and it folded in 90. And the only string I had left in my bow was as a helicopter pilot. 3 phone calls later, I got a job at Mount Hagen with heavy lift. Went up there and wow, what a career that was. That was amazing. Oh, so many stories. I could write 2 books about New Guinea. Oh God. And good stories too. But beautiful country.
Well, don't leave us hanging. Like whip through a quick story, and then
Okay,
you
one of
can't
my
leave us hanging like that, Rich. What's the matter with you? Like, this is an interview, bro. So whip through a
one
quick
quick one.
story, and then just like so the experiences and how you experience the country and all that kind of stuff.
Sure. What I used to really look forward to with utter terror was doing a pay run for the tea plantations in the Hagen Valley out of Mount Hagen. Of course, not of course, that's at about 5,200 feet. So you've already got altitude working against you. And they'd say, okay, Richard, you're going to go fly the pay run for the tea plantations. And I go, oh, can't you just shoot me? And I said, I'm thinking mentally, yeah. So what do? You get out to your little long ranger, a jet ranger, the little baby one.
Yep.
There's the guy in the back. He's already loaded it up with about 30 massive, big green, very tough zip bags full of money because they paid in cash.
Or the
You
Kina.
can imagine what Kina, all the coins and stuff. God, it was heavy. Now he sat in the back and he had them all laid out. They're all named. And then the guys that sat in the front would give me directions. Okay, because you couldn't drive anywhere in the highlands without getting robbed. Full stop. Stop there. So we did this aerial delivery system. So and everybody would turn around and look the other way when I did my gunship takeoff, because you just barely get the machine off the ground. You barely get to the pad, and then you had to take off. Well, that means you had to get that speed up I was telling you about. So I just do a running takeoff. until I got the 15 to 18 knots of airspeed, lift off the ground. Now, the guy sitting next to me in the front was the dropper. I took his door off, and he would just say, go that way, go that way, go that way. Okay, you see that? And you'd get there, sure as eggs. There's this big blue tarp, 10 by 10 or 20 by 20 hanging. It's there on the ground. Inside a chain link fence, all of these places, this tarp was inside the chain link fence. And there's people hanging on, if you could imagine, the locals waiting for their paycheck, fingers ensconced in these chicken wire and the steel wire. Anyway, because I had dropped so many smoke grenades in Vietnam, this is the part I really liked. So I'd say, okay, there it is. I'd check the wind. I'd see which way to come in, keep the wind on my nose. I'd go down, slow down, 50 knots, 40 knots, 30 knots, and I just got 30 knots, 30 knots, 30 knots. And the guy's got the bag in the door and he's ready to go. I was like, now, and he'd throw it like that. And if I didn't hit exactly in the middle, I was cross with myself. So we would do that for 2 hours, right on a fuel load. And okay, go that way. And some of these places, some of the drops I made, I think were pretty impressive. I remember one time flying out of up around the Lunapopi, which was in the place where the volcano went off and cooked everybody. I mean, the explosion up there.
Yeah, Mount
Anyway,
Hagen.
hey?
Mount Hagen?
No. I'm sorry, I'm on another planet now. No, right up in anyway, one of the drops I made, I had come in from the back of this guy's. He always wanted him at his back door. And I said, okay. Well, one day I came in instead of 30 knots, I came in at 45 and I dropped the bag. The guy, the dropper, threw the bag out. It hit inside his back door and it slid. He said it slid all the way down the hallway. So I was really proud of that shot. But that was how you delivered the money to the G plane tax.
Yeah, it's too dangerous to otherwise. Lay, that's the place.
No, actually, it's
Lay?
where Julius Chan was living. Oh, I'm sorry.
Anyway, yeah, it doesn't matter.
New birthday, not long ago when it was a big one.
But right through the door, boom.
Yep, right down the hallway. But never lost that talent. If I could do an ad to try and get somebody to be a helicopter pilot, I'd do it now and say, do it. It costs a fortune. It's worth it. You'll have a very rewarding life. So many exciting things to do. Just keep your head about you. Think logically. Don't rush. And fly, 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 because that's all it was. Doing lolly drops over kids, with 1,000 lollies going out the door from Santa Claus, hanging out at 20 knots, throwing the lollies out. The kids jumping up and down, taking fire almost every single day in the Bougainville War. I don't know where those guys got their bullets, but they just threw them around like they were free. You'd see tracers coming up in front of you through cloud, just trying to guess where you were. I mean, it was insane. Totally undisciplined army, lots of guns and lots of ammo, I did that war for 4 years. Taking fire almost. I couldn't get enough. I'm not kidding. It was amazing. I wrote a little book while I was there, the first tour. All these civilian pilots, and they're flying in military missions. The only thing we couldn't do was go in for a hot extraction. In other words, if someone was wounded, there's an action going on, we couldn't go in. But if he was wounded, right after the action, we could go in, extract them, and get them to the hospital. But you couldn't do it any other way. So I wrote a little booklet, and one guy said it saved his life. Rivers, roads, and ridge lines. Don't fly low level down rivers. Look out for ridge line. Remember, the ground comes up to you at 4,000 feet. Go over it at 5,000 feet. Don't just skim over the top of a ridge line. And roads, never low level down a straight road. These guys, they didn't know that. So each of them that was cycling through, not knowing shit from Shinola, they read it. And I was thanked more than once for that little publication. Now, just left it on the table, So you had to adapt all the time. Adapt. And that's what flying helicopters was all about. It was ultra exciting. It was so much fun. And then when I made Chinooks the last 5 years, because I had gotten the Chinook endorsement in the Army, to get that second tour, they said, okay, you're signing up for a second tour. What school do you want? I thought, well, I sure as hell don't want gunships. So I went for Chinooks. I wanted to work from the rear, not the front. The day I got there, and the guy's got my, what we call the 201 file. It's in the book. And he's looking through my qualifications. He said, oh, you've got Chinooks. And this is the guy that was going to say, you're going to go to that unit. And I said, yeah. He said, oh, they're all gone. The last unit's leaving this month. That's when I wound up in the tow in a firing, as an experiment, firing the tow anti-tank missile. For the first time in history, we had 2 helicopters, the only 2 in the world, shooting these anti-armor missiles, but it was computer guided, not manned, not flown like the SS-11 the French had. So I did the rest of my tour shooting tanks and ammo dumps and trucks and whatever we could find that belonged to the bad guys. But that's the second book. That's the one I'm working on now. So it was just ADHD. Love.
Yeah.
What's next? What's next? Show me the next
I get
one.
it. Believe
You
me.
know,
100%. I get it. But all right, can you tell us where can people get the book? So if they want to get their hot little hands
oh, bless your heart.
on a copy of their book, where can they get this magnificent? And then, as well as telling us where we can get it, can you tell us like what motivated you to write it, and briefly the process of writing? And I'll leave that on the screen while you talk.
Thank you. You can get it at Amazon. And they're just finishing releasing the audiobook through Find Away Voices. That's 38 outlets of audiobooks, including Apple, Spotify, all the big ones. The Audible, it gets to Audible last. It takes them 6 weeks to get it posted. So they're all going to be there on Amazon. That's where the sales have been going out. The Kindle is always no more than a cup of coffee. I've kept it at that level with that phrase, and that's where I've been getting the bestseller banner from. So I've tried to keep the price. Well, I have kept the price down on the digital download, but you can also get the hardback. You can get the paperback, all from Amazon, either amazon.com.au in Australia or in the US, amazon.com. Now, what was the second question?
Okay, so what motivated you to write it, and if you could tell us about the process of writing it as well.
Oh, sure. Oh, gosh. It down in my head. I had so many stories to tell. I wanted people to know what it's like. I want really, it's in the forward. I want more pilots out there. We need more helicopter pilots. The generation, my generation from, thank you for that. My generation from Vietnam, we're all retired long ago now, but that created a vacuum at the performance level. And the helicopter jobs are increasing, not decreasing, they're increasing. And we need more people to fly helicopters. So I wanted to influence someone to write to fly. And I say in the forward, if you're thinking about it, read this book. I even put in one chapter, the complete patter, we call it, the running commentary that the student pilot gets to learn to hover, because I was a military instructor pilot as well. And it's all there. It's like somebody burned it into my brain. You've got it word for word. If you read that chapter, you think about what's being said, you can fly it. Because if you can hover, you can fly it. If you can't hover it, you can't fly it because it's got to hold still. So but the main thing was to share my experiences. If you keep going, you'll see a picture of my dad, who was the sole negotiator for the United States of America with Lee Ducteau for the peace treaty. Sorry, I thought you were in the book. Yeah, okay. But anyway, that's another thing. It's in the front of what he did, Brigadier General George Guay. Anyway, that being said, oh, look at this, you're great. There I am as a student. And there I am on the left, door setting miniguns.
Look at that young looking fella right there.
Yeah, God, time is ruthless, I can tell you.
Yeah.
And the guy opposite your head there, Patrick Mullen, gave me his entire video and 5,000 photographs for the book. That's him and I on the right-hand side. We had to shut the machine down because we filled it with petrol and we were waiting for somebody to tell us we could fly it out. So we're at a fire support base. But yeah, it's all there, folks. That's over 64 photographs. But I wanted people to hear the stories. I wanted people to share what it felt like, to share, as you can see there, the low-level shot. That we flew down there more than we did anywhere else. You see the 51 cal there on the right. That's a communist anti-aircraft stroke the tank gun they put on the top of a tank. That I had to go find looking for one of those twice. And if I had ever gotten within 3,000 meters, I'd have been dead. If you know, they have a 4,000 meter, a 4-kilometer range. Thank you very much. At 600 rounds a minute. But I went looking, and it's in the book. After I left, the fellow that found it was killed. So I was very lucky.
Crikey.
This is amazing. Thank you. But the stories are there. The emotion is there. The guy that read it in one sitting, he says it was very raw, but it's also very entertaining. And honestly, I did include a fair bit of humor to keep the load lightened.
Yeah.
You know, to lighten that load. That was important. And people have actually remarked on that. Thank you for putting that in, because it gets pretty intense sometimes, pretty intense.
Yeah.
And I tried to balance it, and it seems I have. The book just hasn't stopped selling. I've sold almost 3,000 copies now since August. Just boom. Just, yeah, of its own volition.
Can I ask, and I always put this, I ask every guest this, words of advice for the good listeners of Northern Vibe. Can be about anything you want, any particular topic, go your hardest. And I always put people on the spot. I never tell them this question is coming. So it's more authentic.
Very good. And I have an answer for you. I was asked that once before when I was being interviewed by the Cairns Post years ago. As a male, a chest-thumping hunter-gatherer, the one thing that we never do as males, on the whole, and you'll know, having been a police officer, is think past the moment that's in your head and about what you're about to do. Think through the scenario before you act. You can always say, oh, I didn't know it was loaded. Oh, I didn't mean it. It was just no, that's not how court sees it. It's what you did. Think, analyze, project, then act if you still want to. Count to bloody 10 and think about what's going to happen when you're finished. When you're finished, not when you start. Does that make sense to you as a former policeman?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Think about it.
100%. If you've got the time, obviously. But
yeah.
But see, the thing is, and this actually covers on something beautiful from another guest of mine, Donnie Mackay, who was a great leader and mentor and a fantastic police officer. He said, look, you're going to be in a lot of situations where you simply don't have the time to think at the time. He goes, so you're going to be facing these things. So think about stuff while you're sitting in the meal room or whatever it is. That's obviously what training is too, fundamentally. That's all good training is. He goes, but training, you can't be trained for everything. So conceptualize situations and think about what you're going to do. And then actually, yeah, I know people whose lives have been saved by that fantastic advice.
Yep.
But before we, and the last thing I'm going to wrap this up on is, mate, if I pay the premiums, will you sign a life insurance policy for me, naming me as the beneficiary?
I was asked that by my last instructor pilot in the Army. I said no. He would have made a fortune sending all his students off to Vietnam the next week. Sure, it did not cost me anything. Give me the paperwork. The money would have rolled in for him. Yeah, so that's a very good one.
I had to throw that in with that one in, mate. I mean, it's somewhat of an eccentric, a fantastic conversation. Hope you like that as much as I do. Had a lot of people come in the last few minutes. So please like, share, follow Northern Vibe both on YouTube and Facebook. And I'll see you guys.